I'm Richard Lewis reporting for Esports Heaven. It's the end of day 2 pretty much. We're winding down. But it would be remiss of me if I wasn't to talk to the Counter-Strike historian. Now it seems bona fide esports celebrity. It is, of course, Duncan Thorin. I'm just putting that in there, right? Fuck it. So anyway, fuck it. Fuck that introduction. It sucked. But, right, so... First things first, man. Like, I didn't know if I wanted to do this because I just felt you had to wear a blazer to do this interview. It just, yeah, it just...
The professionalism wasn't there.
Well, I'm feeling like it's not professional now. Like, I'm not wearing my Alienware t-shirt.
A disgrace to the industry, you know. I feel like our work shouldn't speak for itself. It should be what we look like. That should be really what matters. You know, the transient outside aspect, not what the immaterial aspects inside, you know. Esports should just be about looking good, sounding good.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, though, isn't it? Because it's almost like a summation of the kind of two schools within esports at the moment, which it seems like such a trivial thing for it to have become apparent about. But you're absolutely right. There are the people that focus on the cosmetic and the slick and manufactured aspects of esports, and then you've got people like you, I would argue, like myself, that are about the more sort of raw and earthy, talking about what esports is actually about. Do you, well, how have you reacted to the criticism? I mean, what are you internalizing right now after being, you know, criticized for what you wore on a stream?
Here's the thing that people might not realize, because I come across as a contentious character. I'm absolutely fine with certain people disliking me. As in, I can understand they might even have valid reasons, okay. They won't be my reasons, but maybe they have a good reason, okay. Not everyone has to like everything. But that's exactly kind of my point, you know. I do my kind of thing, and I try to stay true to that. And listen, if people don't like it, I'm not someone who's like, oh, go away or whatever, but I'm sure there are alternatives. And that's kind of what I'd say when you said there's like two schools, okay. There's the people who want to say, oh, it has to look professional, that's what's going to get the sponsors and all that sort of thing. For me, that's like the veneer, that's like the finish you put on it. And I admit, if you had someone who had substance and they really knew what they're talking about, then you added in some professionalism, a lovely suit, maybe they like take voice classes, they don't have an accent like mine, you know, they can pronounce certain words, maybe they take some sort of rapport building class, they get, you know, really social. That'd be the dream team, okay. I haven't got time for all that anyway, and I don't think I'm suited for that job, so I do what I'm good at. And I always think to myself like this, okay, if it's about substance, if that's really what matters, and to me that's my criteria, then okay, I'm just going to do that for now. I'm going to see how far I can go with that. If someone else comes along, and you know, maybe they have substance as well, and people think they're out there, and they have all the professionalism, everything everyone else wants. Listen, come take my job then. I won't compete with you. I won't be putting on the suit and tuxedo. If you've got a better analyst out there, a better interviewer, whatever you want, have them come take my job then. I always say, actually, if someone ever criticizes like an article or something, okay, maybe like in League of Legends, I don't know much about the game. If I get something wrong, I always just think to myself, like, listen, mate, I do my best job, my style. I'm sure there's lots of people who know a lot more about League of Legends than me. Get a bit of writing skill under your belt, come take my job. You do the same article as me about the same team, who's going to read my article? Yeah. So I'm just doing my stuff, and whoever likes my stuff, great. That's who I'm doing it for. Hopefully maybe some other people can like it as well, but it's absolutely fine to me. I don't say that as like a cool act or whatever, because I know I like things that are kind of niche sometimes. Sometimes I like things that are mainstream, but you know, I think it's fair either way. So yeah. Criticism, some of it's due, okay. Sometimes maybe it's a little bit ignorant, but okay.
So, what about this whole getting back, you know, on camera sort of deal? Because you've done casting before. I've seen you do it for ESL, I believe, in the past. And you know, you were always the color guy, right? The guy who would give some analysis. Then when it came to CS:GO, obviously you didn't like the game. You wrote that article that was quite scathing about it at the beginning. I never thought I'd see you involved in it. I thought you went on to bigger and better things with StarCraft and the LoL. So. Did it kind of come out of left field? Like, why did you even take the job in the first place?
Well, the main thing with CS:GO was, it's not that I hate the game, it's just that there's core things that will never be as cool as things that I liked before. And it's not like I actually think the mistake is thinking that it's one or the other. It either has to be as good as 1.6 or it can't be good. I don't think it even should be those two be the choices. The real choice should be make just a good game. Yeah. And listen, if it's a totally different game, as long as it's good, I could get into it. Now, CS:GO has improved, and what I started to realize was, this came from working in League of Legends, okay? League of Legends is a genre I would never play if it was just me as a gamer and I had no job whatsoever. I'd have stuck with FPS, or maybe I'd have played like StarCraft because I got a bit into Brood War, you know? I'd have never thought to play MOBA. So I would have thought, okay, you have to, a bit like the style substance thing, it has to be like the most awesome game ever to make you want to do it. But I realized a lot of the things I also liked. I liked Quake, okay, and Counter-Strike. I like the core principles of the game, but I also kind of like the scene around it and the history and stuff like that. And what I learned from doing interviews was, okay, maybe the core of the game isn't there as much for me. You can get a bit of that, but you can still have the cool scene. Like, for example, I'd rather watch a Quake match than a League of Legends match, but if there's only going to be 2 LANs a year in Quake, then maybe I can find someone who is a brilliant player in League of Legends, and I can figure out how to appreciate him, because he's going to play 10 big tournaments, so the cool aspect of that's still there, and it can even it out a bit, okay. So what I was thinking with CSGO was, I was watching a bit of the game anyway, and what actually got me into it, people won't realize this, is actually doing the podcast with Khan and Lurpus, because I'd been watching a little bit to kind of keep my ear and like, what's going on with Get Right, the guys I used to follow, are they doing well? And they were like, let's do this podcast, because like the community needs like a real podcast where people actually talk about what they think, okay. And obviously, like, I don't mind giving my opinion on that stuff.
We've noticed, yeah.
No. And I thought to myself, okay, at first I'll do this just for the fun of like, if Khan asks you to do a podcast with him, if you know me and Khan, we like each other, but we're like the kind of people where we have the opposite opinion on every topic, so it's going to be funny, because we're going to be arguing all the time. That'll be entertaining in itself. But what I realized is, as I was doing it, and we'd talk one week, next week I'd want to like I'd be thinking about the stuff we've been talking about, like, yeah, why do video games always lose to NIP? And so I'd actually watch like the next final, the next semi-final, I'd watch a couple of games and I'd try to think of a reason. And what I found was, initially I was just doing it so that the next podcasts would be good. But in doing so, it was like the League of Legends thing. Okay, the genius I've realized of CSGO is that I don't think the game's good. I think the game as itself, just to play on a public server, is shit. But what I realized was, when you watch it as a spectator, you don't get any of the problems of the feel. That's why I don't like the feel of the movement, and I don't really think the spray's so good. But when you watch it, it looks like Counter-Strike. Yeah. So actually, as long as you're watching it as a spectator, so the esports basically, it looks enough like Counter-Strike that first of all, a lot of the things apply. We've got a lot of the same players, so that's cool. But also, I don't think you have to like the game. You can like the esports. I like Counter-Strike Global Offensive esports. Yeah. I like the players, I like the history. It's like suited for me, and I can watch it. I'm not going to play it in the same way I did, but I don't think that's a problem. So yeah, that's why I'm back in CSGO. And it's true, people might think that I'm like taking a job from someone else or whatever, but actually, I'm only doing CSGO now because I like the game and I want it to have like the reason I accepted this job here, okay, is actually because I thought to myself, okay, I know when I was asked to do casting, they asked also, did I want to do casting here? And I said, that's not a good idea because I'm really unpopular. And if this is going to be the first big major game, listen, I like my casting. But I know like that if there's some people who don't, then a section of the populace aren't going to like it. And we're going to have that first big major. And so then they asked me, what about doing like an analysis desk? Okay, so I'm just talking for a few minutes. And I thought, okay, I've never tried that before. I could do that. And so I just thought like, if this is going to be the first big major and I actually think I know what I'm talking about and I think I can do a good job, then I can actually help the game by doing this. So I don't have to just do like League of Legends and stuff. I can do that on the side and I can do like a Robin Hood thing. Okay, that's going to pay my bills. It's going to allow me to do some CSGO as well. Like when I work for this new site now, obviously I could get all the hits on StarCraft 2, League of Legends, but I'm going to do some Quake, I'm going to do some Brood War, I'm going to do some CS on the side of those things. Because that for me is like, I'm keeping in touch with this, but I'm also being realistic at the same time.
Is it hard straddling yourself between all these games? Because I found it quite stretched. Like, I'm actually at the stage now where, like, while I could never talk intelligently about StarCraft 2 as a game, because literally I played it when it launched and played a little bit, and then I just didn't again because I sucked ass. But, you know, I can talk about the players and the scenes and who won what, and I'm almost surprised at myself that I even know this shit. Like, it's in there, you know? But I do it for, like, fucking, you know, Counter-Strike, I do it for fucking League, you know? Like, I feel almost proud that like I've covered all these games and I've got this like knowledge of it in there. But I mean, it is sort of difficult. You've really got to work at it. You've really got to keep going to events and keep watching the games and keep abreast of all the big stories. Do you find it a struggle, or is it like, because everyone seems to think you've got some super brain. Everyone describes you as a human encyclopedia. Is it easy for you?
I wouldn't say it's easy. It's more like I actually cheat, okay. What I realized in life, in general, was that if something is hard, then I will be lazy and I won't do it, okay. Like, there's actually a famous quote from Orson Welles, one of the most prolific filmmakers, incredibly hardworking, so you think, wow, he must be like very dedicated, very disciplined. He said, no, I'm very lazy. What I do is like, I don't let myself stop doing like the things I really want to do, because if I do, I'll disappear into a hammock and you'll never see me again. So the idea was, even when maybe things weren't going so well here or whatever, he kept himself in some project that was interesting. So what I've done with all these games, like I was saying, I found this seed that was really the seed. It's cool if the game's good and the scene's good, but I found a way to love like the history and the scene of a game. And so it's not that it's easy, it's that it doesn't feel like work, because actually I find it cool to find out about the scene of the game and stuff. And like you're saying, I surprised myself when I got into League of Legends. I could find, oh, I can actually do this interview and I haven't like blown it. I haven't said stupid stuff because I'm asking things that make sense to me. I think it's more like a state of mind, like a way of thinking about games than the specifics. Because in CS, maybe sometimes I went too far. Like, I remember some of my articles, I now think to myself, like, some of them, maybe I wrote them for like me and 3 people in the world who would actually think about CS that way. So it wasn't maybe the best mainstream type of thing. Because think about it this way, okay? You can be an expert on the game itself, and so you could break the game down the most in-depth level ever. But I think the way I'm doing it now is more like learning the storylines and the narratives.
Yeah.
And those actually don't connect to the game direct, they're indirectly connected. Because really, like this, you don't have to know anything about CSGO, okay? But if I told you this storyline, okay, tomorrow there'll be a semi-final at the biggest tournament ever, all the money. And the 2 teams who were going to play, one of them was the greatest ever. They won every tournament. They only got stopped every now and then, and even then they'd come second, they'd bounce right back. The team who's going to play them tomorrow, they were getting beaten second. Never beat that first team offline. They had no chance. They could never do it, okay. But suddenly, just before the big tournament, something changes, and they do a little streak, and they're dominating the team they used to. And now those 2 teams are going to meet in the big tournament. I haven't said anything about CS yet. Someone who follows StarCraft 2 could be like, oh, and what happens? Who wins? You see? Like, the storyline actually is disconnected from the end. Now, if you can get a bit of the game in there as well, it's going to add a bit more, it's going to be like more interesting in that sense, but there's validity just in the story. And so for me, that's what I'm trying to do, is tell the cool stories. So I did an article recently, okay, again, I'm not super about League of Legends, so
I was just going to bring this up. No, it's good. I'm glad it's going to flow quite nicely. I read it, man. I actually thought it was one of your fucking strongest pieces. This is the Curse, the Curse 5. And do you want to know why? It's almost like because you eschewed that encyclopedia knowledge, like it wasn't super fact driven, but that you picked out a beautiful story, a story that would it would have been a nothing story in a lot of ways, but the way that you got it, the whole 3-week period, everything, fucking brilliant. So I was going to congratulate you on that in person.
Cool.
So yeah, talk about it.
So basically, that's like the direction I'm trying to go in. That was like the culmination of my philosophy, okay? Because in the past, if I'd have written that about CS, because I'd have had the whole analytical thing, that's good on separate analytical stuff. But if you put it in the historical stuff, the problem is someone will read the storyline, but then if I'd have done that same story like this, and what used to happen was Nip used to always win on Nuke, and it would be like 16-8. They're like, I don't know what Nuke is, 16-8. Like, I've lost them already. Whereas if I kept with the thread of the story, that's really cool. And if they know about the game, they're filling the blanks in themselves. Oh yeah, that was that game, that was that game. So what I found with that story was, this was a really cool story that had been buried. I looked all around the internet. I couldn't find any stories. I found an old interview question, but no one cared about this. Even though what happened was, okay, Moscow 5, the best team in League of Legends ever, they'd only lost twice ever offline. Yeah. And this team comes together of ragers and people who couldn't find a spot in other teams, and they've always been stuck around like the round of 8, semi-finals. They've never even been to a big final. They get this lineup together, and you know how magical lineups are. It's just intuitively it works. This lineup works. They beat Moscow 5, so they've done something historic. You're thinking to yourself, we've got a new contender on our hands. These are going to be like they're going to be CLG, M5, and then it's going to be this team, Curse EU. And you're thinking like, okay, let's get ready for the future. This is going to be fun. The next event, they underperform. Okay, you won one, you did one badly. Figure out what went wrong. No. Before the next event happens, days before, one of their players leaves. So the magic lineup aspect, that's gone. Now you have to find a new. It's very hard. You can't recreate magic like that. It's lightning in a bottle, Yeah. And so, think of that storyline. You had a team come out of nowhere, do what no one else seemingly could, then flame completely out less than 3 weeks later and don't even get to the big tournament. Now, the real story there isn't in-game. It isn't like, what did they do wrong in-game that made them underperform? That has its own interest. Yeah. Really, you want to know what went on, what could happen with players that they couldn't see the short-term thinking that, like, guys, stick together, like we just did that. So what I did was I thought to myself, if I had like any amount of money in the world, okay, what I'd probably do is I'd make a documentary about this. I'd get them all together, and like for example, there was like a famous hip hop group called A Tribe Called Quest, and they were like a revolutionary group, but then they split up and they never worked together again. And so 20 years later, someone got the money together and he did like a documentary, and the whole thing was he had to have access. He got them all to talk about, oh yeah, I had a feud with him, and yeah, I wish I'd. It was really interesting. And again, you didn't even have to like their music. It was a cool story. So what I thought was like that. I don't have the money to do a documentary, but text is free, and I can contact all these people if I play my cards right. So I managed to get 4 out of the 5 members of the lineup to talk, and I told them like the style, like I want this to be like a documentary, but it won't be biased to anyone. My idea is, because I don't know League of Legends, you guys will all tell me your version, and I'll figure out a way to make all the versions into one, and that'll be the story. Yeah. So really the viewer will decide, he can decide, was that person lying, was this person telling the truth? It'll be like a documentary, but in text form.
Well, I saw it as being ESPN's 30 for 30, but in text, right? Which is,
yeah, documentary style.
Right, yeah. So which is why, I mean, which is the kind of shit that, you know, I've been trying to do. I did one about CGS, that 500k slap article that I got nominated for, which was like, again, why did that Z board team fucking collapse? You know, the shit that went in the house, right? So, you know, I think there's so much validity in that. Yeah, again, it's such a underused methodology of telling a story. So, you know, it was great to see you move into that, which is, and I say it shows another string to your bow, because you can't like being pigeonholed as being Mr. fucking analytical all the time, right? Like, I know you're a guy who can spin a good yarn, okay, right? And so does it bother you almost, like, people's perceptions about you? Like, I know you've embraced and adopted the Counter-Strike historian thing, but do you feel that maybe that limits opportunity for you?
Probably to some degree, because I notice there's always a caveat with that. It's always one of those, oh, you're good in this area, but, and then the thing that comes afterwards is like, I don't give a fuck about you or something. So I actually would have some people say, oh, listen, man, your interviews are really good, but I don't have time to watch the interview that long or something. So really what they're saying is, I don't like your interviews. Someone does, okay? So what I used to think when it was that kind of scenario was like, in general, I'm still just going to do my stuff, but I figured out there has to be a way, because in general, right, things get limited by genre, etc. And what happens is you don't like westerns, okay? Whatever the aspects of a western are, the cliches, the tropes, if you're not into them, you probably won't enjoy westerns. I don't, for example. But The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly or Unforgiven are fucking amazing movies, because really they transcend beyond the cliches and the truth. There's something else beyond there. And so what you have to do is find a way to connect the thing that they're not into to something they are into. And the way you can do that is by like translating what is cool about that into something they can understand. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do now. Like, for example, when I do my historical pieces, part of the problem was sometimes they'd come out of nowhere. So I'd write an article and they'd be like, I wasn't around in 2008, like, I don't know why I'd care about that. But I'll give you the example. What gave me this idea was when Moscow 5 split up, very shortly afterwards, I did a historical article about it. That's my first League of Legends one. And so my idea was, the reason this will be interesting is I'll think about it from the perspective of the guy who's just seen Moscow 5 split up, and he thinks, I never really was around for Moscow 5. Why were they good? And so rather than go into the details, I'm going to just tell him the story of why they were good. And because I made the historical, which is, it's permanent, it's over here, it has no connection, I found the topical link to make it topical as though it was like a new thing now. And by combining the two, I think you can get a wider audience and you can kind of get them into something from the past. Then they can be like, I wasn't even around then, but actually that's pretty cool. I didn't know this. Like, now I understand why that player's doing, all the threads are connecting. And again, I haven't had to go into super game detail stuff. So I don't necessarily mind being like pigeonholed in that sense. I am to some degree kind of like that. There's always a grain of truth in it. And I know people do think that I have like, people think I'm like just like Rain Man or something. It's like, oh yeah, no, you're pretty good, but I mean, you just know everything that ever happened. Yeah. Here's the funny thing, actually. I've had players sometimes tell me like, oh, so do you just remember every round that was ever played? It's like, no, the trick is just remember all the rounds that really mattered. Yeah. In a Counter-Strike game, there might be 3 key rounds. If you try remembering it all, you're going to be a mess. If you can just remember the 3 rounds, then you can remember the storyline that connected that to why they then beat that person in the semi, and then that actually allowed the other side's bracket to win the... These are just like 4 things to remember, but it gives you the feel as though you've remembered everything. I actually got asked a question in an interview, well, bizarrely, one of the few I've ever done in my career. I had my friend Monte Cristo do it, and I didn't tell him the questions or anything. He just came up with stuff he thought was interesting. And so he gave me this Hemingway quote that was basically like the iceberg principle, it's called. And the idea is like a really great piece, if you do it, the entire iceberg, no one's going to fucking read that. It's too much, The idea is if you really did an amazing job, you could somehow capture within the tiny iceberg at the top some aspect that you left out of the rest that would hint at it enough that the person could get like a tangible sense of like, he didn't go into that, but I kind of felt like, they could have done more in their career, or maybe that was why they kind of know almost what you omitted. That's hard to do. Like, I'm not that good at it. Yeah, I'm still working on that stuff. But I think if you can do that, again, you can connect the casual guy with the hardcore guy, because you're kind of getting the casual guy and you're going, listen, I'm going to give you the hardcore info, but I'm going to give you it in a way where I'm going to kind of hook you, and hopefully you follow me down the trail. If you don't, again, fair enough. I'm not one of these guys where, I won't name names, but there's certain journalists where if they get criticism, they're like negotiating with people. They're like, oh, I mean, I tried, like, what would you like guys like to see? Like, what questions would you like? I'll give you a little pet peeve of mine. When a journalist says, guys, I'm going to interview this person, send in questions if you haven't.
Any questions you'd like me to ask? Like, what the fuck? Get them to do your job, you prick.
That's like saying, I don't have any interesting questions, and I don't really fucking know much about this guy, so like send questions in and I'll do it. Have you ever seen AMAs done by the public? They're thousands of questions and they're the shittest things ever. It's like, the upvoted one is like, Pepsi or Coke, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's why you don't let the public do it.
Or do you wipe your ass standing up or sitting down? I mean, that's another common one. Like,
here's the thing. If the interviewing public had the skills to do interviews and ask questions, they'd just do it themselves and find out what they want to know, because that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I want to know the answers, and so I go to ask the guy. So if interviewing public had the skills, they would be interviewers. So they don't have the skills, they might know what they want to ask. That's my job, is to ask the things. Now, my style maybe is a bit selfish because I ask what I want to know, but I get a sense that the reason why I'm doing okay right now is there's enough people who can get on my wavelength. Maybe I'm doing the same thing, translating what I really want to know, and you can kind of figure out, oh, I want to know that too. Why is that the case? And so I feel like I've found a good niche right now. I don't know that I'm ever going to be like the #1 guy, because my stuff's never going to be for everyone, really, but I think I've got a bit of a wider appeal than maybe I would have had a few years ago.
Which brings me on nicely to the gamers thing, right? Like, I am amazed. You know this, right? Because, like, here you are.
Okay.
Super based, super edgy Thorin.
Super based.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, right. Just fucking always ripping on Rod, right? Always ripping on Slasher. Always ripping on. I don't know if you've ripped on Travis. I certainly have. But fuck it, why not? Let's say you have. Okay. You've definitely ripped on Sunset, right?
Sure.
Now you're all under this one umbrella organization, and you know, it's a fucking hell of a move for you, and I'm sure it's pretty lucrative, but I just couldn't imagine you working with those guys. So how do you sort of reconcile that, given the fact that, you know, you're the fucking one of the few credible journalists in esports, and it's arguably you're working with some of the people that aren't?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, let's just get this out there, and this is an insult to anyone. When we say working with, when we think of a normal business, it's not like I'm going to come along on Monday and I've got like a desk, and then in the cubicle next to me I hear Travis like banging away on his keyboard, and then Sunset's like, well, I don't even know what she'd be doing, like writing single sentence paragraphs or something. I don't know what she does. Anyway, whatever they're doing, it's not like I'm going to they're going to pop in like, hey, on that historical article, I think you should probably mention women in gaming, because, you know, it's the big topic of our era. And then Travis is like, you know, Double Lift doesn't think that women should be in it. Like, it's not going to be like that, okay? I'm working for them in the sense that the same person in the payroll office cuts my check after he cuts theirs. That's like the limit of our collaboration. And maybe, you know, maybe I could get to know them. Maybe we could collaborate in the future. But in general, like, this is actually something where it's the thing that probably saved my job in esports, okay? There was a time when I went away from esports, and the reason I thought I could never get a job again is because, frankly, I hated or didn't respect all the people in esports. And so I thought to myself, like, I don't want to join that site, even though that will be my edge back into gaming, because I think that guy's a wanker, and if I write something for that site, then he like gets a bit of credit off me doing that. And what I realized was, not only is that like a little bit childish, but also I'm kind of fucking the people who are the readers of that site. Let's say the reader of that site would like to read my articles and he likes his, okay. I'm just like denying him it out of spite, basically. And what I realized was, this is how I got into commentary. I found a way to tie it in, okay. When ESL made me the offer, I never thought of myself as a charismatic on-camera person, but I did think that the way it was done wasn't done right, and I had an idea of how it could be done. Yeah. And so what I thought to myself was, okay, I don't even like some of the people I don't even like some of the casters I might work with, but rather than just complain and let it be shit and say, oh, I could have saved that, I could have done a good job, if I really think I could do it the right way, why don't I join, make it good, and you know what, maybe I can even influence those people. I'm not going to take credit here, but I actually did find that when I did casting with Joe, who in terms of mechanics of casting, I think is the best in the business, his CS knowledge wasn't necessarily, he didn't think about this game in the same way as I maybe wanted the play-by-play guys to know what to ask the color guy. But I actually found he's a quick learner, okay. As I would give my theories on things, he would start to pick up on them, and next time he asked me a question, he'd ask them like in that way, or he'd be thinking along the same lines. He'd like say, oh, now we thought Navi were going to win this, you know, like it wouldn't be like, who's going to win this game? And so it actually started to, I'd had the positive effect, okay. I could have been like an asshole, but instead I'd done something positive, and I'd managed to get my point across, hopefully, and maybe actually have a positive effect. So the same thing here, you're right. Some of the people who work for On Gamers now before I join, not a big fan of their work. Some of them maybe I don't even respect. But here's the thing, I want to join, and then my idea is if we do a really good job, it won't just be like, oh, Thorin works for the site that they work for and it's shit and it's all this. It won't be like, oh, you guys are trash, but you work with Thorin, so I guess you're okay. It'll be more like I can do my thing and do a positive thing there, and we can cover the spectrum of what everyone wants, okay? And so I don't think it's like a credibility, taking credibility. It's just like, I'm going to do my thing, they do their thing, and hopefully by having a wide audience, we can get the good stuff out to everyone. And if everyone has their own voice, I think that's when it gets really interesting. That's why I've always liked your work. Whether I agree with it or not, I know it's going to be like your pure opinion. And the whole point is, you've got like supply and demand locked down, because no one else can write a Richard Lewis piece. And so if no one else can do a Thorin interview, and no one else can do a listen, no one else can do a Travis interview. There's no other human being exists like Travis Gafford, okay? He's the only one who could do it. You can't even mimic that, okay? You couldn't train that. Listen, you're born with certain things. So if we all do our things in our own way, people can love them, people can hate them, but it'll be interesting.
Well, here's the other thing I want to ask you. Right, do you feel like this is it now? I mean, like, right, everyone in esports goes through this like journey, and you either make it or you don't, right? And I don't know if I have, for example. I mean, like, I'm not particularly popular. I don't have a huge following, but I've got the respect of the people that it matters to me. So I can validate this because I earn a living off it, and I get, you know, guys like you saying complimentary stuff about my work. I get guys like Scoots fucking loving my shit. That's enough for me. I'm satisfied with that, you know. And if people like my stuff, same attitude as you. Wicked. I ain't gonna force it down your throat though, and I ain't gonna fucking suck you off to make you read an article that I fucking wrote, right? That's how you gotta roll. But you know, but equally, I know you've had a fucking slog. Like, I remember you from the fucking days with fucking ESEA, right? Like, I remember, you know, I've seen the ups and downs, the SK Gaming thing, the way that went down. This is a fucking big paycheck. Like, it's probably one of the biggest you've seen, if not the biggest by some way. I mean, like, do you now feel like finally, after 10 years or 12 years or whatever the fuck it is, maybe even longer, right? Like, you finally got what you were due from everything you've put into esports? This
is the only time I've ever actually thought, like, okay, here's an idea, okay. In basketball, I came across this term called a lifer. I mentioned this in our interview I did, the grilled interview. You could go watch it, grilled interview, Richard A. Lewis, him talking for like 3 hours. So
it's awful.
No, it's really good, actually. In that, I mentioned this term in basketball, a lifer. And what it is, okay, maybe you're a player for a while, you retire eventually. Maybe you're a coach for a few years, you get fired from one team, you retire. But there's certain people where just because they love the game and they know enough about it, they'll always find a way to be around basketball their whole life. And so eventually they just realize, like, I'm just going to be in basketball my whole life. This is the first time I've actually kind of really felt like, first of all, there's an industry that might be there in 20 years that I could still be working for, but also I could probably have a place in it. Like, I've done the same thing there. I've made my voice unique enough that whether or not it's popular enough, I'll always have supply and demand on the Thorin shit, because who's going to copy me, you know? I don't think anyone's even tried, really. And so the key thing is, basically, like, yeah, have I made it, essentially?
Yeah.
It has been a slog, because there's been times when, until even a couple of years ago, maybe with Acer, I didn't know next year, will they renew my contract? Even when I'm at SK, at ESEA, all these things, will they renew my contract? Will I get paid as much? Will I even still like the next game? I remember these were all games I used to love back then. That was the one thing I knew was kind of holding me in. What about when League of Legends comes out? I don't like that game. Like, do I have to just stop? Does CS get small? Do I become a nobody? These were like real things I thought, not necessarily worries, but they were in the back of my mind. And so what I used to think was basically like this. Let me think how to describe it. Okay. Yeah, let me think. I've got a good way to describe it. I'm just trying to get back to it.
It's all right.
Okay.
Can afford you some time, right?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, there's a famous quote by this, I forget, unfortunately, I'm good with remembering the quotes, I don't remember the name, okay. I forget, it was a famous writer though, maybe like a William Faulkner type, but that level of writer, where if me or you, who like some writing, we can appreciate someone who's much better than us, we'd be like, that guy's god at writing. He would always have sold books, he would have been an amazing writer no matter what. And he said some line along the lines of like, every day I get up and I sit in my typewriter and I think, this is the day when they figure out like I'm full of shit. Because writing, you have to realize writing's like the biggest con in the world. You like make shit up out of your head and people pay you for that. That's like, what industry is that? You don't like mine gold out of the earth. You don't like create a cure for cancer or something. You just make up some shit and then people pay you for it. That's like the biggest con in the world. And so there's a part of you thinks like, how did I even figure out how to do that? And also, what if that stops tomorrow? Now, I've gotten to the point where it hasn't stopped enough times in a row. I don't think it's gonna, but because of the industry as well being shaky, that was always a concern. Whereas now, assuming I don't epically fuck up, and we don't have to do like an interview in 6 months where I'm like, listen,
I wish I hadn't said that shit about Travis.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Who knows, I might regret this interview, we have to see. But assuming that doesn't happen, I actually feel like there'll be enough of a market for the things I do, like I say, that I can keep doing my stuff, and because I can switch games, there'll be a place for me. And so at least for a few years, I could see myself doing this. I think it could work.
So last two questions. I know we all want to get to the fucking bar and get out of here, right? So this is a bit of a deep one, right? Okay, so this is a bit, you know, not the kind of thing I would usually ask. I've really struggled with it because of that journey and how hard you have to slog away to fucking make it and to sort of justify all the time that you put in and all the shit you get with it. I really fucking struggle with like depression and shit. Like at times, like I've really fucking been down in the dumps. I know getting away from it. Like sometimes you know, you just wake up and you just think, what the fuck am I doing? Like what am I doing? And it's almost like the job legitimizes that. But equally, it causes it. It's this horrific cyclical thing. I don't know if you've ever had any sort of experiences with that through esports, like where it's become hard to want to do it. Like it almost feels like the problem, not the solution, you know?
I think part of it, I've definitely experienced that, and part of it was the problem that the industry was so small. And so then when you're people like us, you're not going to get the automatic best job, even if you feel like you're the best guy, because first of all, you won't play ball, you won't do this, that, the other. Those are the things, when there's scarcity, you have to do those things to get the job, okay? When it becomes bigger, like now, maybe someone can pay me just to do my voice, which is what it sounds like it's finally arrived. Like you can actually get paid just to do the things you want to do. Like, wow, it's the first time I've ever had that in my career. But yeah, I've had times where esports has been depressing. Put it this way, I'll tell you something quite honestly. People will lie and say, oh, I don't care what people think, like I just say what I think all the time or whatever. And almost every time I post something really cunty on like Twitter, usually that's because that day, like it was a bad day, like I felt like shit. And that was like the manifestation of it. In the same way as like a mushroom is just the fruit of this mycelial network underneath, okay? If that's not there wouldn't be a mushroom, okay? So, you know, no smoke without fire, that sort of a scenario. Sometimes, very, very rarely, you'll actually say something that seems cunty because like you're being a hero, you are standing up for some of that righteous indignation, like, oh, I'm going to actually stand up for something. Sometimes I think we just tell ourselves we're doing that when we're like, oh, fuck that guy or whatever. So usually that's when it's been like a bad day or whatever. But by identifying that, I think it actually helped me have like a better outlook. Because, for example, I thought to myself, there are times when I do like criticism that I say because no one else is saying. I think this is valid. Someone has to criticize this thing, otherwise there'll be no voice for that, and the overwhelming pandering idiots will just mow everyone down, and we'll never improve because that something needs to change. Okay, but then I also do think like sometimes you can take that too far. You can get too used to always being right, and everyone else has to be wrong. So what I actually tried to do mentally was I thought to myself, I could write really good articles that criticize things, and I will still do that when it's justified. But really, the reason I'm supposed to be in esports, what I like, it's supposed to be like a celebration of like brilliant gamers, amazing stories. So I decided on like the 66% rule. Like I'll do 33% of stuff that has to be done that's critical, but for every one thing I do, I have to do two things that are like positive, that mean something, that contribute something. So even if someone said, oh, that aspect, oh, you were just toxic there, it's like, yeah, but I contributed these things here. So whether you take that point on board, I'm doing something where I feel like overall I can justify it, you know.
So final question, like, I've been a prick in the past. You know, I've ripped on your work. You know that. Fucking, you've ripped on mine. That's just part of the course. We're all fucking grown ups here, right? So it's cool. And you know, we've grown to love each other mutually, I think. Sure. But you know, I've seen you do stuff that I didn't think would take off and be popular. When you first started doing the grilled interviews, I got to be honest, I thought this guy, he's took what he did in text, where he just goes on and on and on and on, and he's put it in an interview, and people ain't gonna like it. And it's gone on to be like one of the most sort of, I mean, you've branded the long interview in esports, and that's a fucking achievement, whether people recognize that or not. Do you feel that you have made a significant contribution to esports journalism, and you are finally going to be respected as almost like a pioneer of new forms?
I would have probably said before, because of my mentality, like, oh, you don't have to like, take it or leave it sort of thing. You know, maybe I won't, maybe I'll have like a minor part. But in general, I find like the response from other professionals is kind of like I'd want before. Like even if they don't like it, they say like, I respect what you do, or it's interesting. So in that sense, yeah. And there's also the factor that like, it's not like I had a plan in mind. It's not like I set out like I'm going to do the longest articles, or I'm going to do these long interviews. Actually, I did used to do things way too long. Like I never learned. I learned a secret about writing, okay? You've probably experienced this yourself. When you're young and you want to do the good article, you have 4 amazing points. And you think to yourself, I've got these 4 amazing points. Oh, I thought of another point, like another one. I've got like 5 other ones. So what I'll do is I'll make the 4 points, then I'll throw in the other ones. It's like I'm going to tip the scales. Like, I've convinced you. Oh, I'm really going to convince you. Now I'm not trying to convince you. So what I'll do instead is I'll just take the 4 really good points, take all the ones that are questionable, or they've got some, take the 4 points and just only do those. And listen, if the other person isn't convinced, they're not convinced. You're just trying to put the thing out and let them make their own choice. Don't condescend to think that you know better than them. Make your points really well, the ones that really matter, that you know, these are solid, I think these are right, and let it be judged how it did. That made my articles, I think, a lot a lot stronger. But here's the funny thing. So initially that meant cutting my stuff down. Suddenly I was going from like 10,000 words to like 5,000 words.
You sold out, Thorin.
Well, by doing that, here's the funny thing. I found out that by doing that, I'd really just improved my ability to do the strong points. And so eventually it went back up to the 9K, but now it was the 9K of only my strong points. Now I haven't got any filler in there. And what happened with the grilled was, I never decided one day, oh, it'd be cool to do 2-hour interviews. What happened was, I used to do post-game interviews, and then I'd think, okay, I've done 5 minutes, I can think up some more stuff. I'll ask like a couple of questions. You know, of course, you did lose a famous tournament there, but then again, unless someone watches that one interview, they're never going to get to that cool question. So what I thought was, okay, do the second part as like a little separate interview, and then gradually, if I had real questions, I wasn't just filling time, I'd make it a little bit longer. And eventually, one day when I had the camera technology, I just decided I'll just see how long it goes. I won't ever decide the time. Like, here's the funny thing. I don't have a timer on the camera when I do it. So sometimes they're 30 minutes long. Sometimes they're 2 hours long. But here's the funny thing. If you look at it, you'll understand my mentality. If you look at the running time, and then I always do the breakdown of the number of questions and answers, just look how many there are. Sometimes I do a 20-minute interview. It has 30 questions. You know, maybe he wasn't giving me much, but I got everything I could out of it. Sometimes I do a 2-hour interview, and I ask 10 questions. So again, I'm actually letting the person dictate it, and I'm just kind of doing my thing, and I let it dictate itself. I don't force it either way. So, okay.
So, will you be remembered as a pioneer? The final part of the question. Okay. Let's get it in there. Well, do you think you're going to get that respect?
I think so, because I think the way things are now, I think I'll still be around. And so hopefully, I'm not enough of an asshole that I've, you know, alienated everyone. Hopefully there's people around who are like, oh, you know, maybe you don't do stuff anymore, but I used to like your stuff, and that's why I do. Actually, that's the reason I got, let's tie it into the beginning of my esports, okay? The reason I got into esports was not, I had no experiences writing, journalism, I had no skills. I just decided I'd like to see interviews like this, and I wish someone had written that article about Blue, my favorite Quake player. No one's ever gonna write that article. Wait a minute. I am not a good writer, but maybe if I put my work in it, I could do that article myself. And you know, I naively thought, if I do it, maybe someone will write about this other guy. That didn't necessarily happen, but then actually, believe it or not, since I got to like my stuff in such a niche way, I can now only write the articles I really want to see myself. And so, okay, maybe I've written myself in a corner there, but I like it.
Yeah. Well, look, it's great to talk to you, man. It's good to see you back on camera.
I like the chance that I got to be interviewed, and then I interviewed now.
Yeah.
Now, the old boys network is we're fully members now. We've wanked each other off on camera, played each other's ego, you know.
I don't know, dude.
Blood brothers after this.
The thing is, I
will keep all the new.
You're definitely in the old boys network now. I'm still fucking shunned. Like,
this is my initiation to the Illuminati.
Well, you know. It's fucking good to see one of us get there anyway, but let's see how good you can make it. But that is Thorin, so hopefully all you League of Legends people have found out a bit about his Counter-Strike, all you Counter-Strike people have found out a little bit about his League of Legends, and stop fucking ripping on him for wearing sports jerseys, man. But anyway, we're going to have more interviews like this one from here at DreamHack Winter 2013. Probably is not a circle jerky, but don't go anywhere. Take care.